What is up, Nole Nation? I am Jesse from Planting the Spear here with Michael, who is at Doak Campbell Stadium after Florida State gets a big ranked win. Kind of had us on the ropes there for a minute, a little nervous, but they end up at the end of the day, they get the job done 38-20. We are coming live after the game to talk with you guys, get some of your thoughts, and just share some of what happened tonight. Michael, how are you, my man? Welcome in. How is the vibe around Doak Campbell Stadium? Probably a little nervous in the first half, but, hey, they got the win, and that's all that matters, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was electric. I mean, just getting here, the Legacy Walk was the most ever attended in the last, whatever years that we've started this thing. I mean, the crowd the stadium was 90% full at kick. That's not normal. And I mean, it was electric from the opening kickoff, you know. And then Duke went down and scored, and then kind of got a little deflated a little bit, and then Duke kicked a field goal and it was 10-0, and you're like, okay, what's going on here? And
Yeah.
it was almost like a reverse trend. Usually Florida State struggles in like either the second or third quarter, and it was like almost a whole first half. Outside of an amazing kick return by Deuce Spann that really kind of ignited the team. But it was great. I thought the crowd was great. They brought the energy the whole time. Kudos to Adam Fuller on the adjustments they made. I mean, people are going to say, well, the game changed when Riley went out. Actually, the game changed way before that. You had to be in the stadium to notice it. It really changed on the when they went forward on fourth down on their own side of the field. That was a game changer there. But just grateful we got a win. What do I always say? A win, a win, a win.
Yeah, man, I agree. And like it it was nerve-wracking. But at the same time, like I will say this, like to start with, man, I will say like they were top 25 for a reason. Like you gotta, I think you have to start first off with like congratulating Duke on a hard
Yeah,
fought game. I'll be honest, we kind of got lucky that, Riley Leonard didn't finish the game because who knows how things would have went. He's an extremely tough guy. They pulled him out of the game. Basically, he tried to go back in and they were like, no, they took his helmet from him essentially. So, shout out to them. They played really well. That defense is legit. I mean, they finally broke through late in the game. Florida State did, but that defense is legit and they played well. And Duke is a for real team. And I think when you look around the country, you see the North Carolina game is a perfect example where they lose to a 1-5 Virginia team. You saw Alabama on the ropes against Tennessee for a little while there. Really just being able to get the win sometimes, survive in advance is really all you can ask for, especially when you're in a top 25 type environment like that.
right.
And so, yeah, I mean, there were some things in the beginning. And really, I think when you talk about the first half of this game, what's interesting to me is it felt really, really bad. Like it felt really like Florida State was out of sorts and things like that. But at the same time, I think you were really one, and everyone's going to have their opinion on it. I think it was a poor decision to go for it. On your side of the field like that deep in your territory, that early in the game, that decision led to 3 points.
Yep.
And then you kind of had the fluky little pick six there, which was a tip ball. And I mean, maybe you shouldn't have thrown that pass, but tip balls, they're uncontrollable. So really, you're talking about two kind of little. I mean, they weren't little, but two events in the game that kept you from being up 17-10 at halftime.
Right, absolutely. I mean the thing, yeah, the throw from Jordan, it was in traffic. Like we got to call a duck a duck. It was in traffic.
Right.
He shouldn't have made that throw. I couldn't see who the receiver was, but he got a hand on it. Obviously tipped it. It was a pick six, and at that moment, you thought, okay, they're either going to crumble for the rest of this half, or we're going to see a response. And sure enough, we saw a response. We saw the kickoff return for a touchdown. We saw the defense bow up. I mean, think about this: they scored 20 points, really on some. That last field goal was on two terrible flags.
Right.
But then the defense did not allow them to get into the red zone again.
Right.
Again, after half, Duke did not even sniff Florida State's red zone, and Florida State's offense came alive. They outscored Duke 21-0 in the second half. I mean, this was very reminiscing of the LSU game all
Yep.
over again. I mean, just.
Right.
And then the last thing I'll say to you on that is, the offensive line, Mike Elko is an incredible coach. I'm hoping Texas A&M fires Jimbo and hires him and gets him the heck out of the ACC. That
Yeah.
dude is so good. But they knew, I mean, they schemed to limit our offensive line. I mean, they could not run the ball to save their life. I think they had 38 yards after, like in the middle of the second quarter, and I think into
Yeah.
the halftime. But built by storm, wore them down. Finally, we got the run game going, and we got the win. So that's all that matters.
Yeah, I took some stats down at the halftime mark. It was 38 yards rushing, 2.5 yards per carry. So pretty bad, but they threw the ball. They moved 175 yards through the air. They finished with 4.8 yards per carry. So still not great. But man, I will say this, like, this offense is entirely different when Jordan Travis uses his legs.
Yeah,
And we saw that late in this game. It completely changed the way this offense was operating. I mean, it opened so many things up. And he's really like he's one of the most elite runners
yeah,
from the quarterback position in the country, but you forget that he even has the ability to run it because he just, in the first three quarters, it was like, man, if he would just run the ball, like the
yeah,
offense would get moving. And then as soon as he did, I mean, the offense found its spark and it was going. And like you said, the defense did their job in the second half. They didn't let them score. And again, I thought that I was a little concerned in the beginning, in the first part of the game, where they really didn't have any sacks at halftime against a quarterback who, yeah, he did have the one rollout run, but he really wasn't mobile. You could tell he wasn't comfortable running the ball, and they didn't get to him. They needed more pressure.
yeah,
So that was a little disappointing that they couldn't get to him. I thought they got pushed around up front. They couldn't. I mean, they were averaging 8 yards a carry almost going into halftime. So they failed to set the edge. That was really the problem there. On the defense, they just lost contain a lot, and they're good at getting pressure, but it just seems like they're struggling to get sacks this year. And then in the second half, they were able to make some adjustments like we've seen them do. They picked things up, and so looking at the total yardage here, you're looking at they got 420 yards to 273, so they outgained them like crazy. And that's the thing that we were talking about is how this game felt a lot closer than what it really was when you think about it. Duke got some points on that fluky pick six, and then, the way that Florida State was able to move the ball and the penalties, man, the penalties continue to really just screw Florida State. And I mean, you hate to say it like that, but when you talk about 150 missed, holding calls that are flagrant. Jeff Flanagan, of course, I think I tweeted about that before the game. Like, I'm just putting you guys on notice that he is the head ref tonight. So get ready for it because it's coming. There's a lot of penalty aided stuff. And that's really been a narrative this whole season, whether you like to admit that refs are an issue or not. But yeah, man, I just think that at the end of the day, you got the win. But, this team, I really just think this is kind of who they are at this point. Like, they're a team that's a little inconsistent, a little mistake prone, but when they have to turn it on, they can.
yeah, I agree. I mean, we're towards the end of October. We're 7 games into the season, and so fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And so this is who they are. There's no longer believing that Florida State's just going to turn it on and we're going to have, we're just going to start blowing teams out by the first or second quarter. This is who they are. Duke is a good team. Don't get me wrong. Duke is a good team. They're top 20
Yeah.
team. They're well coached. They got some athletes, but you saw in the fourth quarter, Florida State is far superior than
Yep.
Duke. That game should have been over by halftime. I mean, when
Yeah.
Florida State turned it on, Duke could not compete. And so you're right. They're gonna have bad quarters sometimes, bad halves. But when they turn it on. We just hope that they don't do that against like a really great team, and then we're down. I saw somebody tweet out. They said, if Florida State's down 14, I still would believe that they could win this game if they were
Yeah.
down. And I thought the same thing. I never felt like we were out. I was very nervous. I changed all my superstitious little behaviors I was doing, try to find something that would work. But, but I never thought we were out. I just thought, man, we got to turn it on because the old saying, it's getting late early. But they did,
Right.
and we.
Yeah, and I mean, Florida State is definitely, without a doubt, one of the best second half teams in the country. I mean, they come on. I think it's really just a matter of getting to the point where maybe you just don't want to find yourself in a hole you can't dig yourself out of at halftime. I think that's really the biggest thing, that you're looking at here. But again, I mean, I really do think that when you look at what they're able to do in the second half, they just overwhelm you, and that's a lot of the rotation that they do. Like, the offensive line, I think, is a little frustrating at times because they kind of failed to get some run push tonight, and the run. This is why, this was another reason why when we talked about after the Virginia Tech game, it was like, I don't want to say the run game is necessarily back because they beat up on a bad running defense, but like at the end of the day, they do have that depth and they do bring in these guys. And then you saw late in the second half where you out depth somebody and they just bowled over them, and I think that made a big difference. I also thought you saw some young guys step up in this one. Hakeem Williams had another good catch here, and
Catches.
yeah, and I will say, like, first up, obviously, prayers up to Johnny Wilson. Hopefully, he is okay. Initially on the broadcast, they thought it was a lower leg injury, but he did walk off the field under his own power without any assistance. So they actually came back and said they think it might be some kind of head injury, maybe a concussion or something like that. So hopefully he's okay. Hopefully it's not anything serious, but you did see some young guys step up in his place. So what did you think about what you saw from Hakeem? Because, man, I'm telling you, he's flashing now more consistently.
Oh, he's flashing more consistently. He's a big body. He made a couple critical catches in the game. I think there was a third down there on the right side there, where Duke jumped off sides. It was clear. Everybody in the stadium saw it, and the ref didn't throw the flag. I'm not saying anything about it. But anyways, he caught that ball and got us the first down there. I'm telling you what, man, he's stepping up and he's getting critical. I mean, that was a critical part of the game that he was in and making those catches. So you're seeing, Mike Norvell and Alex Akin there putting these young guys into play at critical moments because they believe that they can help, they can win. And sure enough, Hakeem, man, he's going to be, man, I know people are going to be sad when Keon leaves, but I'm going to be sad, but you got somebody coming behind him that's really good.
Oh yeah, definitely. And you even saw some circus catches from Biscuit tonight. I mean, the one where he just wrapped it around his leg, and
Yes.
it looked awkward, but it looked awesome. It was a great catch. And then really Jaheim Bell was a big part of this offense tonight. He had a great game. 8 catches for 53 yards, along of 15. So catch rate of 80%. That was good. Johnny Wilson had 5 catches for 58 yards. To Philly 4 for 40. So Keon had 2 for 54. Again, you just saw some good plays. Kyle Morlock, unfortunately, had the one that got called back. But then when you talk about Jordan, you saw some frustrations early in the game. He missed a few throws that I know he wanted back.
Oh,
But I think overall,
that throw down on the first drive where he had Bell wide open. I mean, Bell catches that. I mean, first of all, if Jordan puts it right, Bell catches it. It's a touchdown. It's a clear touchdown. There's no one in. But Jordan put it high. Bell touched it, so he should have caught it. But, man, gosh, you had that one back.
Yeah, but he's still, when you look at his numbers, 27 to 36, 268 yards, 2 touchdowns, 75% completion rate. He also, again, I think the biggest story really of the game here, 10 attempts, 62 yards on the ground and a touchdown, average of 6.2 yards per carry, a long of 20. I mean, again, he led the team in rushing. It's different. Like, it is so different, man. When he uses his legs, this offense is unstoppable. And I think I understand that you want to stay healthy and you want to keep him available and in the game because, as they say, of course, the best ability is availability. So it's like you want him there, but man, it just changes the offense and seeing him run the ball. But I thought the defense as well tonight, when you talk about outside of a couple of the big runs that they gave up, and we know there was holding involved on most of those big plays that they got away with that sprung them to the outside, that had a lot to do with it. And then the first long one, Finchel Tripus, he kind of overran it and he took a bad angle. And then there was, Kirk ripped us on the broadcast for not having the pursuit. Like, they didn't pursue well. They kind of like they loafed a little bit maybe. I didn't think it was as bad as what Kirk made it out to be, but he ripped us in it. But I mean, I think overall the like Tatum Bethune, man, that he's a dog. Like he laid the wood on a few people tonight. So I think like the defense, man, I'm not as worried about them. I think that they kind of, when you talk about Riley Leonard tonight, he really had no running ability, but I was surprised. I was actually surprised that they went with him. And hopefully what he did in the second half there, like hopefully that didn't do anything more serious, because you hate to see that happen to anybody. And I thought it was kind of risky to play him anyway. But, I think more than anything with him, I thought it was their thought process on playing him was not so much who you got for as quarterback, but in that environment. You didn't have to put a freshman in that environment, because you saw he came in, had to delay a game, and it had some things go a little awry. So tell me about that too, because Doak sounded really good on TV. So like, give me some of your thoughts on how you thought the crowd was tonight. It seemed like, it was kind of tough to stay in it there for a little bit, but late in the game, once Florida State got on them, you could hear Doak start to really crank up, and things got fun there for a minute.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the crowd was electric from the very beginning. I mean, they had the flyover with the military helicopters. I mean, they had obviously we were doing the Seminole Heritage recognition today. We had homecoming today. I mean, the crowd was amazing, and I would also say too that even in the tense moments, the crowd came through. There was a little bit of booing when he went forward on fourth down there in our own territory. I did hear that, but I mean, honestly, rightfully so. And I'm sure because he always owns up. Mike Norvell's gonna take that and own that in the post game there. And but yeah, the crowd was awesome. The crowd was incredible. And and I just wanted to say something about the defense there a little bit. I thought something that was really frustrating to me was Duke ran the same 6 run plays. I literally charted them. The same 6 run plays. And it blew my mind that we did not. I mean, even when Riley was in there, the same 6 run plays. And they were gashing us. It didn't make sense. And Riley proved that any throw 10 yards or under, yeah, he's going to make those. Anything above 10 yards, he was not completing the throw at all. Why were we still playing 2 shell? I think I text you that. Like, why are we still playing 2 shell? We should be man free and having 8 in the box. That was frustrating, but you know what? They made the adjustment. I'll give it to Adam Fuller. They made the adjustment there, and and they couldn't throw. They couldn't throw the ball. Like they were going to have to run the ball to try to win the game.
Yeah, and I do agree with you, because there was a few times where you saw a play and you were like, okay, you know what's coming, they're about to run it, the play that's going to run it, and it still gets 5, 6, 8 yards, and it's like you knew, like everybody in the stadium knew where that was going. But I do think you do make a good point. You did well against the pass. Riley Leonard was only 7 of 16 for 69 yards, 44% completion percentage. Henry, the backup quarterback, when he came in, he went 1 for 6 for 7 yards. So you did really, really good about stopping the pass. It's just like I said, you had the one running back that kind of tore you up, Jacquez Moore. But I think the thing was too, like Florida State's done really good against true running backs this season. We've talked about that in the past. So, I think maybe they were over planning for Riley Leonard a little bit. Maybe they thought if he could go, they thought he would be able to run the ball. But at the same time, like you could tell early on that he wasn't going to be able to run. And I thought that maybe they could have, I thought they should have came after him a little bit more maybe in the beginning. They didn't really get to him. Like, to me, you kind of knew with that type of injury and that type of quarterback, if you give him a couple shots early, there was a good possibility he wasn't going to finish the game.
Yeah. They rotated the safeties down a couple times. I know they sent Shaheem on a couple blitz. They sent, Kevin Noles on a couple blitz there. It just didn't get home in time. And he broke off. I think, he was about to get sacked. I can't remember if it was the second quarter or third quarter. He was about to get sacked, and he broke off like a 20-yard run. And you just thought maybe he can run. I mean, I think I texted you. I watched him in pregame warmups. I mean, he looked great. He had a little bit of limp, but he looked great. And so I texted you. I said, I think it's 75% he's going to play. And sure enough, they played him. And, was he the difference in the game? Like, I mean, in some ways, yes, but in some ways, I really think it's on the defense. I really thought, like
Yeah.
you said, they didn't attack enough. Had they done that, I really think the game would have been a lot different than what it turned out in the first half. He really wasn't that big of a difference in the game, but
No.
especially when he went out. I mean, the place. I mean, they were quiet for the injury, but as soon as he went out, that place got turned up.
Yeah, yeah. And like I said, man, I really do think the reason that they went with Leonard more than anything, because obviously they didn't try to run him at all. They didn't try to move the pocket or anything like that. I really think the only reason they went with him was because of having the little bit of experience
Yeah,
being in the environment that they were in. They didn't want to rely on a freshman to try and run the offense because you could see, even if he just had to stand back there, and do little things here and there just to try and keep the offense moving.
yeah,
I think that's why they felt better with him being back there, was just so they could have someone who could run their offense in a tough environment.
yeah.
And I mean, like we said, outside of a couple of runs, Florida State's defense did a good job. I mean, this is still an offense that has some playmakers. I know that they're a defensive led team, but at the same time, I think Florida State, when you talk about the offense, like we said, there were some missed opportunities. It was affected by some penalties, but overall, you did maintain the 30-point streak, which I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit worried there for a minute. I was like, man, maybe this whole, like, them holding teams under 21 the whole time, the whole season or whatnot, maybe there was something to that, but
Right.
they finally did get over that. But just to kind of switch gears for a second, man, I will say this: like, I love watching games get played. Now that we are farther out in the season, like some of the games today, we'll just kind of talk about that real quick too. So you saw Boston College; they got a win today, so that was good for them. They're quietly off to a 4-3 start. When you talk about that, you saw them get a little win there. So I mean, hey, you're starting to see teams that make fun of that win. But hey, they're looking a little bit better now. You saw North Carolina lost against Virginia. For those of us just joining us,
Shocker.
again, I mean, like, you have to be able to win these games. Like, at the end of the day, as ugly as it looks, you got to be able to hold on. And fresh off the press here, obviously this will be old news if you watch it tomorrow, but Miami beat Clemson in overtime 28-20. Who would have
Oh,
ever thought? That is crazy. So, like, that, man, that Miami game is going to be big now. And really, I think the interesting thing when you think about that, obviously, that's not so much good for recruiting, but I think people do understand when you talk about Clemson, they got blown out by Duke. They lost to Florida State. They were in a tight game against Wake Forest. Now they just lost in overtime to Miami. Like, they're kind of in shambles in Clemson right now. So, I mean, you get that side of it too, but I think you'll also have the opportunity to take on this Miami team. So that's going to, they could sneak their way back into the rankings. We'll see. Let me see real quick who they got coming up. They got Virginia, which, I know they upset North Carolina today, but we'll see if that's anything there. And then NC State, who's not great. So, I mean, they could be coming in ranked against Florida State, and this could be another giant game in Doak Campbell Stadium. So, man, what do you think about that one?
man, the shocker. I last I heard Clemson was up, 17-7, and then I heard 17-14, and then I saw they were in overtime 17-7, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, man, Clemson must be really falling apart. I mean, this was a Miami team that was down in the dumps. I mean, they're ready to fire their coach, maybe. The players are ready to quit, and Clemson just let them get back on. I'm so mad at Clemson.
I know that was well, see, here it is. Same thing with Clemson. 3 turnovers in that game. So, like, they 2 fumbles and an interception, and I would be willing to bet that a lot of it had to do with Cade Klubnik, who, yeah, he had an interception. Let's see who had the fumbles. He had 2 fumbles. So, like, man, wow, they had 4 total fumbles and they only lost 2 of them. So, like, they still have massive turnover problems there at Clemson. I think also I'm sure you probably saw before you got into the stadium, the Oklahoma game. They really struggled with UCF. They kind of really got lucky there at the end to dodge a loss there. So, it's just, I think it really, like we were talking about, it gets back to where sometimes it's really just about surviving and advancing and just getting the win. Yeah, someone said definitely Klubnik on a Facebook comment. Like, yeah, man, I mean, I get it. He's like former 5-star. He's supposed to be the next Trevor Lawrence 2.0, but maybe he's good at playing quarterback, but he sure does he is a turnover machine, and like they have some problems. And that was something that we talked about too, was where they don't really have anyone to turn to now. Now that DJ's gone, he's the guy, so they don't have anyone to turn to. So they're just kind of stuck with that. And then you did see Wake Forest; they got a win today over Pitt, even though they were playing like the water boy at quarterback.
Third string quarterback.
Exactly, like they let the mascot play quarterback for a little bit, but Pitt's so bad they still lost that game. Let's see, anything interesting. Somebody said that Houston was robbed, by the way, against Texas. I did see that game was really, really close, 31-24. Yeah, man, which at the same time, like they even talked about this on the broadcast. They were talking about how, and just for reference, Washington is currently tied up with Arizona State in the second quarter. And, Arizona State's not great. They played a few teams tough. But you got Michigan won 49-0. LSU just absolutely slayed Army 62-0. USC sustained another loss, 34-32 to Utah. Yeah, they beat them 34-32.
Has beat them 3 straight, I believe. Oh my God.
But what I was going to say is they talked about this on the broadcast some too, where they were talking about how they actually showed a graphic, and it was funny because Kirk was like, "We're not responsible for this, guys." But there was some kind of graphic at the end of the show where they said if basically the Big Ten, the Pac-12, the SEC, and the ACC, like if they all finish like they went out undefeated, Florida State only had a 43% chance of making the playoffs because, and that's crazy to me, which I mean, we'll see like how some of these things play out. But I definitely think that, that the UNC loss didn't help because you were kind of looking at them to be the team, to be. And really, honestly, you might see this Duke team in the ACC championship again now. Like when you look at that, how bad UNC looked today. And I really do think that part of what Mike Elko did late in this game was he went, we can beat UNC and we can still make it into this thing. So let me take his helmet from him right now because there's a lot of season left to play.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that first of all, let me go back to that comment about an undefeated ACC champion Florida State is not getting left out of the college football playoff. That is asinine for even ESPN in their terrible campaign against Florida State this season to even put a graphic up like that. It just, that drives me crazy when they do that stuff. I mean, no one's leaving out an undefeated Florida State of the college football playoff. Let's be real. But with Elko and Duke, I tweeted out today. I said at the end of the game, he's a heck of a coach. And if they can get Riley healthy, we will they'll likely be in the ACC championship game. Because, I mean, I don't know who's beating that team when they're healthy. That defense is so good. I mean, oh my gosh, they're good. They're disciplined. They play tough. They're physical. You wouldn't ever say that about Duke, but they're physical. I mean, you could see it in the stands how physical they were, how tired some of our guys had gotten, but they prevailed through. So I think Elko once that sack / questionable face mask call happened on him, he was down for a bit and then he tried to walk it off. And you could see, I don't know if they showed it on the broadcast, but I was watching their sidelines and he's in the back of the sideline there. He's trying everything to try to convince them and smart.
Yeah, he's a really tough kid. And I mean, he's a warrior. He wanted to go back in. And I think that's just one of those situations where as a coach, it's your job to save a kid from themselves.
Right.
And that's really what he was doing there because they still have a lot to play for. I mean, again, they can still make it to the ACC championship. They'll probably have a rematch with FSU if that's the case, because now you think Clemson's pretty much out of it. They're they're eliminated. So Miami, they're like the cockroach who's like avoiding the boot. They're staying alive just a little bit. They'll crawl back in their corner a little bit and then they'll come back out. So they're doing just enough to stay alive. So there's a lot to play for there. But yeah, man, I definitely think that like when you talk about that defense, this is something that we talked about in the preview was this is a very well-coached team. Like they don't have the most blue chip players, star ratings and things like that, but they are very disciplined. They allow you to make the mistakes. And granted, they did have some penalties tonight, which did help you out a little bit there, killed some of their drives, but this was a team that you knew you couldn't make mistakes against.
Right.
And then you have, Jordan threw his first, again, which it wasn't really on him because it was a tip pass, but his first pick six, his first interception in Doak in 2 years. And
Man,
it's like it just felt like, yeah, because I looked it up this morning because I actually took the under on him throwing a pick. Go figure. I jinxed myself because it was like it was whether he threw one or not. And I went back and I'm like, well, he hasn't thrown a pick since Syracuse in 2021 or something like that.
right,
So in Doak, that is. And so then, like, you just had some weird things happen tonight, but you had a lot of adversity in the first half of this game, and you were able to overcome it. And I do think that is the thing about this team, too, is because they have those veteran leaders that they don't get down when they're down. You know what I
right,
mean? Like, they know how good they are, and they know they can still come back. So there's no quit in this team.
right. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Florida State again. Everyone wants to say they're a second half team, whatever you want to call it. They finish, right? Mike Norvell talks about that all the time. It's finish, respond, and finish. And when their back was up against the wall, every time they got down 10-0, then they scored. They got down 17-7, then they scored again, and then they got down 20-17, and then they come back out in the second half and they just pound the ball. Jordan running. I think they came into this game plan with the idea of like, okay, let's not run him as much because his defense is pretty good. They're
Yeah.
going to take shots at him. But then as soon as they came out in the second half, it was almost like we're going to run this ball. Jordan's going to run it, and we're going to throw only if we have to. And I would say I don't have the stats in front of me. I'd say they probably ran more times than they threw in the second half for sure. And Jordan was a big part of that. As soon as he started running, that defense just opened up like the Red Sea. I mean, it was like they couldn't
Yeah.
stop it.
Yep. Yeah, I agree, and you could be. It's like you can tell that defenses don't respect Jordan running the ball anymore. Like
Right.
you can see where it was almost like when he did start running the ball, you could tell there was no respect for him
Right.
running the ball because it was wide open. All he had to do was pull it, but they had not seen him do it in the past, so they didn't
Right.
really respect it. And as soon as he starts running the ball, I mean, it opens up so many other things. I think
Right.
we saw some other good plays from the other backs tonight. Keziah Holmes got in on it.
Yep.
And then CJ can or Rodney Hill got in some too,
Hill.
which was nice. And so yeah, man, I think overall, like I do think that at the end of the day, Florida State got the win, and that's all you want. We knew this game was going to be tough. And I mean, at the end of the day, you still covered the spread. And like when you talk about our score predictions, I don't. I was talking with someone earlier. I'm like, I don't know really how you divide this up. So I had said 34-20 if Leonard plays, even though I don't think he's going to be 100%, or 38-17 if he doesn't play. So I hit 38 and I hit 20, but I didn't hit it in the same score prediction, but both quarterbacks played. So, like, I don't know. Maybe I can just grade on the curve and just go ahead and say I was pretty daggone close to getting it right. But I think that just goes to show you that the game went kind of like you thought. It just didn't
Yeah.
look pretty. But I
Yeah.
really do think that nowadays, when you look at this team, when you go into predicting a score or any kind of game, you just know Florida State's not going to play 4 complete
Right.
quarters, and if they ever can, then they'll be they'll be in a really good position. But like I said, this is kind of how we thought it was going to go. They covered the spread, they got
Yep.
the win. This is about in line with our score prediction.
Yep.
It's just I think this is like if I honestly wish we could just skip to halftime, like do the coin toss. Call it even. Let's go to halftime. Spot them 3 points if you want. Let's just play the second half because the first half's too frustrating, but the second half, man, it's amazing to what they're doing. It really is amazing how they can win the second half. But again, I think that's like we've talked about before. I think a lot of that is the rotating out, the keeping bodies fresh, the doing things in the first half, to set up things in the second half because they know it's going to be a 4-quarter game.
Yeah.
And I mean, you get a top 25 win feather to stick in your cap after this one. So now that's 2 ranked matchups. Again, the Clemson win doesn't look as good now, but you still get to, you can say that you went into Death Valley. I mean, I don't know if Miami would have won in Death Valley, but at the same time, like you still have a good resume and you still get a Miami team that should be ranked. Florida, hey, we'll see. Like you never really want to cheer for the Gators to do good, but I mean, they could, we'll see how they do against Georgia without Brock Bowers in a few weeks.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've always been a person that tried not to look too far ahead. That Miami game is going to be big, depending on how both Florida State and Miami arrive to it. Obviously, the Florida game, you don't really want to root for them, but if they're going to win, please win so that it'll look good if we can beat them on our resume. But Florida State needs to get in and lick their wounds and get better, healed up, whatever, and then we got, I think it's Wake Forest next week,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
At
Yeah.
Wake Forest. And let's just be real, we have not beat them in a couple of seasons. And so that's the most important game in front of you right now is Wake Forest. Go up to Snuggy Hill and beat them bad. And then you got Pitt after that at
Yep.
Pitt. So you got to fight, that's another terrible team. Cannot play down to them. And
Yep.
then if you get through those two games, then start worrying about Miami. Miami has a good defense. That's probably why they beat Clemson was
Yeah.
the defense today. That defense is really good. I mean, take out the UNC game. I mean, they had UNC on the ropes for a while there, and then
Yeah.
UNC just kind of put it on them. But that's a good defense. So take care of Wake Forest, take care of Pitt, then you worry about Miami.
Yeah, and I'm interested for next week. And I think a lot of it too is you just want to see how this team does against all their opponents. Like,
Right,
you don't want to see them go in and have a close game. Like, when you saw what Clemson did against Wake Forest, it was like, okay, it
right,
was 17-12, and you're like, maybe you don't think anything of it. Clemson's
right,
had some struggles on offense. Well, then they turn around and lose to Miami. So
right,
you want to see them get better every week and handle that opponent next
right.
week. Lord knows, I just want to beat Wake Forest. Like, this is ridiculous.
I'm
3 years in
sick
a
of
row.
losing to
Like,
them.
exactly. And at this point, you don't really even know who you're going to get a quarterback. Are they going to go with the guy who just threw his first pass today in a touchdown, who actually had a game-winning throw? Like, I mean, kudos to him. But, you got a couple of banged-up quarterbacks. You should go up there and win that game by 30
Right,
points. And that's what you
right.
want to see. And in Pitt, you should go win that game by 30 points. So you really just want to see them you got 2 weeks here, 2 opportunities. And again, like we talked about, you can't overlook any team. You can't
Nope,
sleepwalk into any Saturday, because
nope.
obviously you've seen that you can be tight in some games that
Yep,
maybe you shouldn't be in. I don't think you can overlook anybody, but you do have 2 weeks coming up that you can kind of get right. You know what I mean? You can
yep.
work on some things. Maybe you can get out early and rest some guys. But that's really going to be what we're looking for. It's just handling those guys like you should, and don't have
Yeah,
any slip up games, because again, every game is important 1 week at a time. Now that you passed another test on the schedule, you passed one of the harder tests, but you cannot blow it or waste it against, a lesser opponent. So we'll be back to talk about that game, of course, next week. I mean, again, like we talked about, man, I know it's Wake Forest, but like this is one that I had circled preseason on the schedule because
yep,
daggone, I'm ready for some ACC revenge tour
yes,
going on here. So,
yes.
Michael, any final thoughts before we wrap this up, my man? I know you're still hanging out outside of Doak there. I'm sure it's a fun vibe now that we got past the little bit of chest pain that we had early in this game. Like, we got to get over that because like Bayer Aspirin is not an official sponsor of this podcast unless you want to, because we are like some cardiac Noles right now.
Oh my
So
God.
yeah, like Bayer, if you want to reach out or something, because man, it was stressful, but it was at the end of the day, I really do feel like at one point in the game when Florida State went up 24-20 and they were going down to score, you were like, okay, I even tweeted out like, go deliver the knockout punch. You
Yeah,
felt the
yeah,
momentum turn, and you
yeah,
knew if they scored, this game's over. Riley
yeah,
Leonard's out of the game. You would take a
yes,
2-score lead, and you knew it was over.
yeah,
And as soon as they went down and got that, it was like, okay, we are done. We are wrapped up. We are over here. So any
yeah.
final thoughts before we get out of here?
Yeah, I mean, I just kept thinking the whole time. We just got to get the lead. If we can get the lead, I don't care if it's by 1 point. I felt like once we got the lead, we weren't going to let it go. We would
Yep.
win the game. And so when they went up 24-20, I felt good. And then, yeah, that next score was like, oh, yeah, this is over. 31-20. It's an 11-point game. They would basically need 3 possessions to win the game. It's not going to happen. Well, I guess 2, but and so, yeah, I felt really great about it. I thought, again, the adjustments by Mike Norvell and running Jordan Travis more, getting Keon a little bit more open. That catch, I think, was 3rd down where he caught it in the middle and looked like it was almost picked. That's a Keon catch. He only had 2
Yeah.
catches, but that second catch was huge.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Oh,
Let's talk about that for one quick second before we get out of here, because
okay,
that
I
was
didn't see it. I have to see the copy, so
dude.
you got the better view of it.
When I'm talking about like the window that went through, it's not, you can't qualify that as a window. That's like a thimble of space that they had. And I mean, I don't know. First off, I don't know how Jordan fit it in there. It looked like it almost grazed the guy's hand. And
Oh,
then, I mean, like when they showed the frame of him catching it, you couldn't see anything but Keon's hand because his whole body was blocked out by the DB.
Yeah.
he just does unreal stuff on a regular basis, and it's a huge weapon to have. And, granted, you could miss some time with Johnny Wilson here. Like, this is why he went out and got Keon
Yep.
Coleman, because he's
Yep.
an absolute game changer. And it's been, at least 3 to 4 weeks now where you're like, how
Oh
does
my
he
God.
do this? Exactly.
I mean, it was. I mean, I just remember. Like I said, I'm not really superstitious. I'm a little stitious. So, I was standing up. Most of the crowd was standing up the whole game. But in the second half, I decided I was going to stay seated. And when I did, they started winning. So I didn't want to get up. So I was watching on the screen that throw, and I thought it was incomplete. And the crowd was going crazy. And I'm like, oh no, he caught that. Holy cow. And they showed the replay. And I was like, oh my gosh. That's why you went again. We're gonna say this almost every
Yeah.
week. That's why you went and got. That's why you went and got Keon Coleman. Oh, side note, just real quick, we have breaking news. Florida State just took a 2025 commitment from 4-star linebacker Ian Pritchard. Just committed tonight on campus.
Oh,
So
nice. Heck
big,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I know there was a lot of recruits in the house for this one,
Oh, a
so
lot.
maybe
Yeah.
they were a little dicey in the first half, but they got to see an electric Doak Campbell Stadium. They got to see Florida State get a top 25 win. And, like we said, although it looked dicey in the beginning, you still won by 18 points. You still
Yeah.
covered the spread.
Covered.
So at the end of the day, like, that's what people are going to look back on,
Right.
that you still won. And they did show the recruits standing on the field before the game. And I mean, they covered almost the entire end zone, like
Yeah.
widthwise. So there was a ton of people there. And, people we've got multiple crystal balls in now to flip 5-star defensive end or defensive lineman Armando Blunt from Miami, who we obviously know LJ McCray committed elsewhere today. So that would be a big get for your class. And like you
Yeah.
said, I mean, you're getting some momentum, and even in the 2025 class. And these are the type of wins. That's the type of environment that's an easy sell for recruits.
Yep.
And I think
Yep.
that's going to be another one when you get to the Miami game
Yep.
later in the year. You're getting to, because you got North Alabama, but Miami's really your last big home game. I think that's going to be
Right.
another really, really big
Right.
recruiting event. And so hopefully it's an electric atmosphere. Hopefully it's at night as well. But like we said, we're not going to get too far ahead yet. We still got to take care of Wake Forest and Pitt first. But man, we're flying through the season, Michael. It's hard to
great.
believe that we're going into game number 8. We're already 7-0, but
Crazy.
I just think at the end of the day, like, no matter what it looks like we talked about, you just got to sit back and just enjoy being 7-0
Yep.
and being a top 4 team in the country, especially when you see all the scares that other teams are having.
Yep.
You're not alone in that. Like, you are not
Correct.
alone in struggles. And you see
Yeah.
the UNC game, and you just realize that, like, you're blessed to get a win every week, and you just got to enjoy the ride, because it's just, I mean, you're thankful to be here, because you can slip up at any week, and a lot of teams have, and you're the last remaining undefeated team in the ACC.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, you know what I say, bro? A win is a win is a win. At the end of the day, it's all about getting the W. Doesn't matter how ugly it may be. You can always fix the ugly during the week. You can't fix an L, right? You can't fix an L, but you can fix a W. I think some of the great coaches say, it's better to learn from a win than to learn from a loss. And
Yep.
so they got the win. They turned it on. They shut out Duke in the second half. The defense was great. Fitz was great again.
Yeah.
Not to say anything to that, just he was great. Alex was great punting wise. He did have a little. I won't call it a shank, but I think he missed it. One of those. It got down in like the 40. It was like, oh gosh, let's not give them momentum. Like, so close. But other than that, it was great. I thought the return was great. Fitz did, give him a couple opportunities to return that ball. I was like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Let's not forget Virginia Tech ran one back on us now. Come on now.
Yeah, I wanted to see a few more touchbacks there, and we really didn't even touch on Deuce Span's return either. So that was cool. That was cool to see, and that's a guy where, like, that he's still kind of a raw talent, but he has immense talent. So you want to get the ball in his hands however you can. And that's something that they were able to do, getting him on kickoff return. And man, I mean, once he gets out in space, he's a strider. You're not going to catch him. So, and it was cool. They actually showed in the pregame warmups where Norvell was like coaching him, like, get the ball in your left hand, have your right hand available to stiff arm, because you're going to get an opportunity. And then sure enough, it was almost like a premonition by Coach Norvell. So, but again, man,
first kickoff return since Trey Benson ran it back against Boston College last season. So
Yeah, and before that, it was in the national championship game. So at least now we're getting like
Right.
one per season. So that's nice too. Yeah, I mean, it's just I think overall, like again, there was a couple of very small moments that made this game look
Yep.
worse than it kind of the outcome really was.
Yep.
But when you look at the picture as a whole, I think it is what it is, and they got the win. And I think it was overall, it was a good game. It was a good, like I
Yep.
said, it was a
Good
good
game.
game outside of a couple of little moments that you had some mistakes that went against you. But
Here's the thing. Here's the thing too. I'll say to this: it was a good game, and what it does is Clemson forced Florida State to look at themselves deeply to say, what is wrong with our run game? Okay.
yeah,
Duke has done somewhat of a similar thing to say, okay, obviously we switched it up. Our run game started working, and then Duke did something else. Now we know what teams are thinking towards the last half of this season because Duke put on tape what they did against us, right? And so now Mike Norvell and co can go back, look at that, work on their offensive line, get that shored up. I mean, because dadgummit, on 3rd and 1, we should be able to get the freaking first down, like
yeah.
run the daggum ball. But I think it's going to be helpful because Duke allowed some things on tape that'll help Florida State get better in the long run for the second half of the season. So a win's a win's a win. We got the win. Let's go beat Wake.
Yeah, I definitely think you can see this offensive line has struggled against the better defensive lines in college football that they've went up against. So that does concern you a little bit. But
Right.
hopefully, again, like the way they rotate, getting some guys healthy, hopefully that'll be something they can work on. But they have struggled against some of the better defensive lines that they face. So that's something that does have to get cleaned up. But
Yeah.
again, if you can get Jordan to use his legs, maybe that's enough to neutralize that issue there. But yeah, I mean, like we
Yeah.
said again,
Yeah. I was going to ask you, like, Archangel Music says, hopefully Duke gets another shot at FSU with a healthy Riley. You think they get him healthy enough to get to the title game?
well, I'll say, let me look real quick. Let me look at their schedule and see who they got coming up. So it looks like they have they're at Louisville next. Now,
That's going to be hard.
yeah, because like he was running up and down the sideline. So I
Yeah.
think he's probably okay. But again, this becomes an issue of
Right.
do you keep pushing it to the limit and
Right.
risking injury, or do you just rest him because you have Wake Forest after that, and then you had that big game against UNC. So, like, do
Right.
you risk it against Louisville and then he gets hurt again?
Right.
Or do
Right.
you just kind of let him sit for 2 weeks and then come back for that North Carolina game? But outside of that, they have Pitt and Virginia. So, really, I think if they get past Louisville next week and he's healthy enough to play in that North Carolina game, I think they could get back in it. I think that is
Yeah.
definitely, that's still that's on the table there. And I think if he is healthy, I do think he changes their offense.
Yep.
But I mean, again, yeah, I think that him being a runner is better for
Yeah.
their offense. Obviously, I think if you'd caught a healthy Riley Leonard, maybe the game is a little bit closer. But at the same time, like because they did run the ball a lot on you anyway. I mean, it's not like I mean, they didn't have any trouble running with the running back. So, I don't know. It's hard to say. There's a lot of ifs and buts and things that can be said one way or the other. If
Yeah.
who knows that? I mean, that's hard to say. But I think they very well do. I do think if they get past Louisville, they'll be the team to beat for the ACC championship. But I mean, who knows? Because that was a conference loss for UNC against Virginia.
Right.
But they could easily come back and I mean, it's still North Carolina. Like they could still beat Duke. So there's
Right.
you just really with these things, hypotheticals are great, but you got to take what it is on the
Play
field
the
and let the games get played. Yeah, exactly. That's really all that matters. I mean, who knows? Virginia Tech has still only got one ACC loss, so who knows? Maybe they sneak in. I mean, you just
That
never
would be
know. Like,
wild. Oh my
I
gosh.
would love it. I think that would be awesome. So, yeah, man, who
Ugh.
knows? Yeah,
We
it's too hard to go on hypotheticals.
Yeah, yeah, I would say I'd agree with you. It's so tricky, especially with his injury. I mean, it's a high ankle sprain. I mean, you and I both said this in the preview show, said in the articles, said all over the website. He probably should not have played this game.
Right.
And
Yep.
there's a chance, even though he was moving around well, right? That's the adrenaline, that's everything. He injured it again, and when that adrenaline wears off and he goes
Yeah.
to treatment, it could be much worse now. I mean, he could almost be out for the rest of the season, depending on how bad
Yeah.
it flares back up again. I mean, that's a high ankle sprain. I'm not a doctor. We're not doctors, but I looked on the internet, I guess, and it says typically 4 to 6 weeks of healing time, especially for athletes, and he came back in 3 weeks. Like that's probably not the thing that should have been done. And so yeah, it's really tricky to see if he'll be able to play next week at Louisville. Louisville's hard. I mean, Jeff Braun's got them chumming. I know they just lost to Pitt, but I mean that's a good team. And so yeah, that's a tricky thing. I don't know if they can get past Louisville, then anything's possible for them.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that because you're going to have some games coming up that are going to decide some things, and
Yeah.
and obviously as we get ready to close the season here, like you're going to have that game, and then Virginia Tech plays Louisville too, so like that's going to decide some things, and then Duke UNC, like there's still a lot to play for. Like Florida
Yep.
State is really the only one right now that's in control of your own destiny. You just
Yep.
got to win out, and then you're good to go. But really, there's again, I mean, you still have UNC because that was their first ACC loss. You have them, you have Louisville. And
Yep.
then you also have Virginia Tech and Duke that are all in it. But I will say, man, like Duke is legit. Like I'll
Yes.
give them credit. I think
Yes.
I think that when you talk about with a healthy Riley Leonard, seeing what happened with UNC tonight, I think they're the second best team in the ACC.
Oh,
I would for sure.
I don't disagree. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. With a healthy Riley Leonard, they're easily the second best team. So, like you said, can they get him healthy in time? Can they get past Louisville and then maybe let him rest for Wake or something like that? But again, it goes to show you that any team can beat any team on any Saturday. So you just
Yep.
never know. I mean, they could slip up and lose. Who knows? Virginia could be spoiler to more than one team. Who knows?
Right. Oh yeah.
That was just insane. I mean, 6-0 and 1-5. That's still hard to believe, but it really does seem like Mac Brown is good for one of those a year, pretty much. Like,
Well, I was just gonna say, Mac Brown is usually good for one of those a year. He hasn't beaten Florida State. Usually, it's Florida State that comes in or Appalachian State. So, the fact that it was Virginia, it was 1-5 Virginia. I mean, it's just that's what you get for taking Sam Powell from us.
That was right. That was us in 2020. We were the UVA upset over number 5
That's
North
right.
Carolina in 2020. So they gifted us one too. So I mean, Mac Brown, he's just he's such a nice guy. He wants to hand everybody out a ranked win. So
and he's a Florida State alum, which is
right.
crazy.
So he was just throwing us a bone. Maybe he's already won a title. He's good. He thought Tony Elliott was going to get fired. So he's like, hey, look, man, I'll help you out. You're a young guy or something like that. So. Yeah, it's interesting, man. Like I said, there's a lot still left to play for. It's going to be exciting, and hopefully we can just keep doing our thing, keep getting better every week, win the games that are in front of you, and let all the chaos, to whoever's going to be your opponent in the ACC championship, let them fight it out while you just keep winning. Because, like we said, you're going to be favored in every game the rest of the schedule, the rest of the way. I think the Miami game just got a little bit more interesting because I was surprising. You know what I mean?
That was. Yes, it was.
A lot of it was turnovers, but that was surprising. But, we said, too, that we thought Miami was a good enough team to beat UNC. And so it's just, man, it's crazy. Like, it's nuts. We're going to have to bring back the ACC Wheel of Destiny.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I felt like maybe not. You have to go back and NFL replay me on this one. But I felt like in the preview show, we said there was a chance Miami could beat Clemson. Because they had a good defense and Clemson's offense was suspect. If we didn't, we should have.
Yeah.
And they proved it today. I mean, Miami's got a good defense. Like that's what it is. And Clemson has a suspect offense, and so you put suspect offense with the turnovers versus a really good defense in front of all three of their Miami fans, and you get an upset. I mean, it's what it is.
Yeah, they they held Clemson to 31 rushing yards. 0.9 yards per rush. That's ridiculous. Yeah. Now they gave up 314 through the air, but they put up 211 yards on the ground rushing. Oh yeah, and to make it even more interesting here, to be honest with you, and as much as I hate to say anything crazy about Miami, Tyler Van Dyke didn't play.
Wait, what?
Tyler Van Dyke did not play. He did not. It was a game time decision with an injury and did not play. So they beat Clemson with the backup quarterback. I know.
Oh my! Emery Williams played. Oh
yes.
My gosh.
24. Now he didn't. He probably wasn't responsible for a whole lot of the win. 24-33, 151 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. But still, I totally forgot about that they beat them with the backup, and so that's just wow, man. I mean, they held Will Shipley had 15 carries for 44 yards. Maffa had 5 carries for 14 yards. Yeah, man, that's
Well,
crazy.
I'll say this. I'll say this. You remember, what was it, 2016 ish? Florida State was like number 3 in the country, went to Louisville, got our butts handed to us, embarrassed on game day. And then they had to fill out some kind of effort contract later in the year.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I'm just putting it out there, little birdie, putting it out there. Clemson's on the same track. Dabo might not be long for Clemson.
Yeah, and I will just reply to a comment real quick. Archangel Music, yes, they did beat him with a backup. It did go to overtime, but it's crazy, man. Clemson, like, yikes, like
Just
that's
saying.
that is crazy. I mean, like, no, I don't think it was double overtime. It just says regular overtime. But yeah, man, that is wild to see the fall off that they've had in such a short
Wow.
amount of time, and
Just like
you know,
that quick.
right, and you would have thought that bringing in I thought Garrett Riley was a really good hire there.
It do.
So, I really and I think what's interesting on this, and this is something we'll talk about real quick. I don't want to run you too long. I know you still got to drive all the way back to Orlando, but just real quick looking at 2024, I thought this was something where like you had to win the ACC this year because of who you have,
Right.
and you would have thought that okay, well you got to win it this year because next year you could have some trouble
Right.
with all the pieces that you're going to have to replace after next season. And Clemson still, they got a young quarterback and all this
Yep.
stuff, and they'll probably be back or whatever. They're just having a down year. Man, it kind of looks like Florida State. You always have the portal pieces that you can add, and some of this class that will come through in 2024 and stuff like that. Like now, it looks like maybe this is something that you can sustain. I mean, to be honest, we both thought that Florida State would still win 9 to 10 games next year. We still
Yeah.
think that's a good possibility, but it looks like now with Clemson struggling, it'll be tough. It'll be tough there. So, yeah, we'll see, man. And I mean, when you talk about Miami, they have Virginia coming up next, and then they have NC State before they play Florida State. So that's going to be, chances are they're going to win both of those. So you might get a 7-2 ranked Miami. That
Yeah.
could be a really big game there. So
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
excited for that one.
Yeah, I think it'll be great. Archangel Music asks, "Do you think the Sooners will drop in rankings because they struggled today with UCF?" No, Archangel Music. They only drop Florida State when we struggle. They don't drop
Right.
anybody else. No one else suffers that from the coaches polls or the AP polls. No, I don't. I don't think they will. I think everybody in the top 7 won today. Washington was still playing. I don't know what the score there is, but I think everybody in the top 7 won. So if everybody wins, I don't foresee the rankings moving that much
Well, I
at
will
all.
say I was pulling it up right now. So Georgia was idle.
Right,
Michigan won in a blowout. Ohio
right,
State got a top 10 win, so they're going to stay put. Florida State
right.
got a top 25 win. Chances are they'll stay put. I'll check Washington's score in a second. OU is at 6 and Penn State is at 7. So Penn State lost right below them.
They'll
So
drop.
that's a spot they're not going to jump. Texas, we know, struggled with Houston at 8. So
Ooh,
they're not really going to budge. Oregon was pretty close with Washington State. So I don't think that would be enough to jump 3 spots all the way up to go above Oklahoma. So I think they're going to stay. I think your
yeah,
top 6 are pretty much going to stay put. And then you'll see, obviously, Penn State fall probably. But,
yeah,
because you have UNC that lost to and Alabama that struggled. So they'll probably fall below Texas and Oregon. And you'll just do a little bit of shuffling there. So, no, I don't really think so. Whoa, Washington is losing 7-3 at halftime to Arizona State. So that would be go Kenny Dillingham. Like,
let's go, Fighting Dillinghams. Let's
yeah,
go.
let's go Dilly. Like, hopefully, man, that would be a crazy upset if they could pull that off. But that's the thing, man. Like, games still got to get played, and there's bound to be some kind of upsets like the UNC one, even in maybe the top 25. You just hope it's not you.
Let me say this real quick. Have you ever I was telling you before we came on air that I had this feeling. And it seems like every season of college football, there's always 1 week where the craziest stuff happens. The teams that shouldn't
Yep.
be losing, lose. The teams that shouldn't be winning, win. The teams that are like the top 5, they struggle. I mean, just up and down the board, unless you're Michigan and you play nobody. I mean, and so I had that feeling today. And look at this. Washington,
Yeah.
after coming off of that win, honestly, which they shouldn't won because, Dan Lanning made a terrible call there. But they're struggling with Arizona State. You got UNC losing. You got Clemson being upset by by Miami. I mean, you got Oklahoma struggling with UCF. I mean, it's just up and down today. Today was one of those days.
Yeah, definitely. And then and that's what's fun when you get to late season football, when you get to the end of October. And do keep in mind that you do have the playoff rankings coming out soon. I think they
Yep.
come out after next week, after next
Yep.
week's game. So that'll be something too. And looking at next week, just kind of going through, I mean, there's not a whole lot here. You got Virginia Tech and Syracuse. I do mention that it is at Virginia Tech only because we know we just talked about them still being in the running for things. North Carolina travels to Georgia Tech, Duke, Louisville at Louisville. You got Clemson, NC State. That's something to look for next week. Just really kind of looking for anything that might be worth watching here. Georgia, Florida play next week. That one could be interesting. Oregon and Utah. Again,
Oh,
with Utah beating USC, that'll be a big
yep.
game there too.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a ton of stuff there. Washington and Stanford, they should probably beat them pretty good.
Yep.
So, but you still got rivalry week coming up, and so you're getting later in the season, and so yeah, man, it's been fun. There's more parity than we've had in the last few years. So at least we can enjoy that. We can live that up to have where honestly right now when you say your playoff teams, you're kind of taking a shot in the dark because you really don't know. I mean, without Brock Bowers, Georgia could sustain a loss in the next few weeks. LSU, they could throw a monkey wrench in this whole thing by beating Alabama and going to the SEC championship. And that really for Florida State, what if we still act like LSU can't win out? And if Ole Miss sustains a loss and then they beat Bama and they end up winning the SEC West, that could look good for them too. So.
And the college football playoffs would love a 2-loss SEC team to put in there. They're just itching for it. They're just wanting it.
Yeah, they're going to find a way to get somebody in there. But there's a lot, like I said, there's a lot that's going to play out that's going to be interesting now that really all the chips are on the table. We're late in the season and
we forgot that Georgia still has to go to Tennessee.
Yeah, they still have to go to Tennessee, who hung with Alabama today. They looked pretty good. And, it makes you sick in all those games because you're like, Alabama's going to come back. They're going to end up winning. And they always daggone do. But they played them tight in Tuscaloosa. So we'll see. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of football left to play. And you still have the SEC championship there too. So it's going to be interesting, man. But it's been fun. Like I said, this is something that we were hoping for just to have the parity back. But it's been fun. And like we said, when you talk about all that parity and you talk about all that stuff, really, you just want Florida State to keep winning and just don't be that team. Because like you said, every week it seems like there's one team that gets pantsed on national TV, and you just don't want to be that team.
Nope, you do not. You want to win, you want to walk out, you want to wave at people and start prepping for next week.
Yeah, because we talk about style points, but at the end of the day, once teams start getting eliminated, it may not matter. It may just end up being a win-loss column type of deal, and so you just keep winning every game they put on your schedule, and that's all you can do.
That's right. Let's go.
Well, Michael, we are going to go ahead and wrap it up here. I appreciate everybody tuning in. I know you had fun at the game. I'm so mad that I sold my tickets. I wish I could have been there. I don't know. At the first half, I was kind of like, all right, well, it's okay. I'm fine with it. But in the second half, I wish I had been there. But, man, I'm just looking forward to every game going forward and being back in Doak for that Miami game. I know that's looking forward, but I'm just ready for that one. So, Michael, I appreciate you being on, my man. Be safe driving home. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We're going to go ahead and we're going to call it here. So go Noles, everybody. Florida State beats number 16 Duke 38-20 to move to 7-0 on the season. Still undefeated, the last undefeated team in the ACC. So thank you for watching. I'm Jesse. That's Michael. We're Planting the Spear. Thanks for watching, and go Noles.